Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar from Insight to Action, Building Smarter Campaigns Faster. I'm Stuart Russell, Chief Strategy Officer at Plinc, the customer data experts. We enable brands to better connect, analyze, and activate their data to increase loyalty and marketing effectiveness. And we're here today because many marketing teams are facing a familiar challenge, a very real tension we feel between ambition and reality. Brands have invested heavily in technology, of course, marketing clouds, automation platforms, CDPs, point solutions for personalization and specific campaign use cases. And yet, despite all of that investment, our observation is that one of the most important parts of customer marketing still feels harder than it should be, namely turning insight into the right audience quickly and confidently. In other words, many teams are still looking for greater, what we call audience agility, the ability to understand what is happening in the customer base, identify and refine the right selections, and move from insight to activation at the pace that businesses increasingly need. And this matters perhaps more than ever because marketers are being asked to do more with what they already have to get more value from the platforms that their businesses have invested in. They're under pressure to be more data-led, more personalized, more responsive to customer behavior, and more commercially accountable, increasingly so. But too often, the path from customer data to campaign action is slower and more complex than teams would like, despite the proliferation of what should be enabling tech. So today, we want to explore where those bottlenecks sit, why they exist, and how brands can move from understanding their customers to activating smarter campaigns faster. And to help us do that, we're delighted to be joined by James Alty, founder and managing director of Apteco. Apteco is a UK-founded business with global reach, and the developers of the Apteco marketing suite, including Fast Stats and Orbit, technology designed to help marketeers easily explore customer data, build audiences, and support campaign decisioning. Plinc and Apteco have worked together for, I think, over 17 years, and we've implemented Apteco solutions for many of our clients across retail, hospitality, and gaming. And from that experience, we think Apteco brings a unique and very practical perspective on how marketing teams can get more value from their data and, crucially, from the platforms that they already have. Also joining the conversation, I'm pleased to welcome Graham Burton, CTO at Plinc. And Graham will bring the Plinc perspective on how Apteco fits into the modern customer marketing stack, particularly through a lens of Unilize, which is Plinc's proprietary data platform and continuous 360 customer view. So the aim of the next 30 minutes, rather ambitiously, is to have a practical conversation about how teams can use all their data, understand customers more clearly, and ultimately build better campaigns faster. So, James, I'll come to you first. Good morning, and thank you for joining.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
So I thought perhaps we could start at the start and set the scene a little bit. You and Apteco have been around customer data and campaign decisioning for a very long time now. Perhaps for anyone who may be slightly less familiar with the business, perhaps you could articulate quickly what problem Apteco was originally created to solve, and perhaps elaborate on that a little. Why is that problem even more relevant now?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart, and hi, everybody. Yeah, I mean, our strapline has for years been insight into action, but actually we started as a tool for creating quick counts from large databases. The very first version of FastStats fitted on a floppy disk with 150,000 business records and was sent out monthly by post. And over the nearly 40 years since then, we've grown now to a platform that supports analytics, visualization, modeling, and audience activation. And our biggest systems now are over, well, the biggest system is over 40 billion rows updated every night with everything that goes across the scanners and through the online platforms of a UK retailer. So it's a very much bigger platform. Right back in the beginning, Fast Stats was invented to deliver speed. The name said it all, Fast Stats, and in those days a stat was just a count, but we swiftly moved on to analytics and then on to activation. And along the way, we ensured that the presentation layer of the data meant that we were delivering that power and that speed to non-technical users. So we've always had the ability to label and present the data beautifully, taking away technical complexity, making it approachable for data savvy marketers. And nowadays we sit alongside warehouses, cloud platforms, CRM systems, activation tools, and we provide that specialism in identifying the audience cohorts and then delivering those into activation in all sorts of ways. So nearly 40 years, lots of data and lots of usability.
Excellent, thank you. So I think that for us, that removing the technical complexity piece is absolutely key. I mean, Graham, from Plinc's perspective, where do you see Apteco fitting in the modern customer marketing stack?
Yeah, thank you. So I mean, I think our experience shows us there's no two clients or prospects have identical tech stacks. And whether it's different reporting tools, data platforms, activation channels, the commonality we've seen is there tends to be that gap between a data foundation and then, the execution platform. A client might either be working with us or have their own data capability. They may have internal reporting. They probably have a very decent marketing cloud to deliver the campaigns. But I suppose really where we see Aptico filling that gap in the middle is that making customer data accessible to everyone, so that the audience discovery and segmentation piece, but then also allowing us to act on that with activation without the need for heavy technical support. So I guess, so, to summarize from a Unilize perspective, it's a key part of what we call our analysis layer. It complements either reporting solutions that we have, that clients have, but ultimately helps teams take and act on that insight really while it still remains relevant.
Excellent, thank you. So I kind of want to build out this or dig into a little bit more about this audience agility problem. It's not particularly original term that we use a lot when we identify these challenges, and I think it's core to a lot of the problems that teams are having. I mean, Graham, when brands say they lack audience agility, or when we identify we feel they do, what does that look like? How is that manifesting itself in the day-to-day experience of the modern CRM marketeer?
Yeah, and I think when you break it back, the process of building a marketing campaign rarely actually starts with a campaign brief. So more commonly, we might be in a Monday morning trade meeting. There might be an issue. We're down and we're underperforming in a category, and the default behavior is send everybody an email about that category. And where audience agility really starts is actually that ability to start digging into that insight. So what we might find is there's a particular customer or behavioral group that are causing that underperformance, and actually we can that becomes the starting base of a much more tailored and targeted campaign. I guess the process then follows on from that. We've got to build out the personalization, put the offer strategy in place, ultimately activate that audience cross-channel. So whether it's email, website, or digital media. And if we think about that sort of end-to-end piece, for many brands, when we start talking to them, that's a 2-week process or even more. You're briefing in multiple teams. It's probably not their top priority. So you're having to use different siloed platforms, and ultimately, your ability to deliver is really based on the prioritization and resource available across that wider team. And agility for me, and certainly at Plinc, is we should be able to do all of that in a day. So, and that requires an integrated ecosystem that has the right capabilities, that's targeted at the right end users. And ultimately, probably the last bit as well is when you actually build the campaign, provides the reporting off the back of that so that we can quickly learn and repeat that cycle.
Excellent. And so audience agility really starts with having easy access to the data, which, James was fundamentally the MO of Apteco. What does good audience access look like in practice for you? Presumably not raw database access for everyone, something more
No, and
practical.
certainly that presentation of the data is important. I mean, audience agility we look at as train of thought analysis, or the phrase that we use when designing some elements of our software, do anything to anything, which we only realized after we created it actually spells data as an acronym, which quirky. But we make visual data selections easy. So using dashboard type presentations where non-technical users see a beautifully portrayed, probably visually oriented presentation of high volume data from which they can make a visual selection of audience cohorts, bringing insight really to their fingertips, but also in a manner that they can share. Democratization of data, democratization of insight is important. The analyst needs to share with the marketer needs to share with the planning team or their boss, and we make that easy in Apteco. And you can use both the raw data presented beautifully in Apteco or derive further results. You might be building segments and cohorts and models and people who've behaved in a certain way in the past that you want to keep hold of really easily in Apteco, and then move on to techniques like recency, frequency, value, and basket analysis and profiling and indexing techniques, all presented in an easy manner so you can start finding the lookalikes that matter for your underperforming area. How are you going to find more of those people, include those models, and then use that for segments and activation? And there's lots of ways that we can drive activation with Plinc. As you know, we can provide the cohort, and that can be scheduled, it can be maintained, it can be uploaded into platforms, so it's always ready on demand. When technical needs arise, then the data can be ready in advance. So speed and bringing data to your fingertips really makes good audience access.
And I guess the question a lot of people have on listening to this webinar, all attendees will have a marketing cloud, campaign automation platform, a customer experience platform, whatever the broadcast piece is. Well, how should they think about the difference between those platforms and Apteco and Fast Stats and Orbit? I mean, we're certainly seeing more and more interest from brands who are heavily invested in marketing cloud technology, but are looking for this additional augmenting solution. What's the difference? What are the sort of two key use cases?
So, well, we think of Apteco as the best companion for your cloud or CRM
Yeah.
system, and particularly delivering all of your data for all of your users, not just those that you can afford to put onto the proprietary platforms, for all of your queries, all of your analysis, all of your models, all of your comms history, all of the time. Get a full year-on-year perspective of your data. Don't feel constrained by the cost of your cloud platform. Instead, get that data into Apteco and really work it. Get more value from your cloud systems, whether it's a marketing cloud, a CRM system, an experience platform. It really doesn't matter. We find it easy to integrate Apteco with all sorts of platforms. And that agility and reach, the ability to use all of your data, means there's no need to compromise in the personalization that you undertake. Supporting that personalization in every dimension. Looking at how you present that offer, how you engage, which channels you use, what price points you're presenting, for example, all through a single user interface, beautifully presented, so it's easy for marketers and analysts and modelers and activation people all to work in the same space, and ensuring that with Plinc's support, you get a common view. You want to match your trade reports with your analytics, with your campaign activities, so that you know exactly where the business is up to and how you're going to undertake it without unexpected licensing costs, storage costs, costs for running queries, costs for running models. We have a flat pricing model, so it's easy to deploy alongside other systems, and we present ourselves as a companion to those systems.
Yeah, the real cost of ownership is becoming an interesting conversation right now. Is even thinking about the proliferation of AI technologies and how people are understanding what the real cost of those are.
Yeah.
But very interesting. I think that point around no compromise, the data, your customer breadth and depth, the access without compromising on speed, I think is really key. And journeys, but let's dig into the data in this environment. Graham, maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit. I mean, how you talked about it being a really important part of our insight and audience layer. How does that come about? Where do we really augment the platforms that our clients already have?
Yeah, for sure. I guess ultimately, one of the core bits of starting point really is bringing the data together from across the business. So most businesses that we work with, lots of siloed data, and Unilize is I guess the core data platform underneath that is bringing that together, and we really, want to preserve. I think the granularity of data is one thing we've talked about there. So if you want to delve down into, the deepest sort of part of your customer data, on a train of thought, we need to have that granularity of data to be able to do that. I think another element as well, though, is the uniqueness of a client's data model. So no two businesses are the same. They have different tech stacks. They have a different ordering process. So therefore, forcing a client to adapt a standard data model, they often lose the uniqueness of what their business is. So I guess that's another really important point when we look to connect this up is that the view of the model of the data model that you will see is totally unique to your business and is not a standard model that you sort of have had to adapt to. And from a Plinc perspective, the context is everything. I think I talked about in my previous example. We need to be able to react before it's too late. So therefore, having that data up to date is key. So for us, a typical Apteco instance will have a 15-minute refresh cycle. We want updates throughout the day, so that whether you're building audiences, abandoned baskets, abandoned browse campaigns, or whether you're running insights, maybe a dashboard tracking, a new offer that's been launched that particular day, that you can get that up-to-date information. But probably, some of the important things that sit alongside this, I think James mentioned it, we need consistent numbers. So for the business to adopt and really get the most out of the platform, the numbers they see in the trade meeting need to be the same numbers they can run in the Aptico solution. The audience they run needs to match the audience they run in the marketing platform. And I think we run into a lot of examples where, oh yeah, we had all this great data, we selected 100,000 customers, but when we came to email them, we lost 30% of them. And that doesn't really work. And there's a lot of upfront work to make sure that we resolve those issues so that we have a single view of the truth across the whole business, whether it's reports, Aptico, or the marketing platforms. So I guess that's sort of the data coming in. Probably the other element that it's important, that what we're actually connecting to are the activation points. The Aptico platform provides a lot of really good out of the box integrations, so whether it's ESPs, digital media, Google, Meta, etc. But then at Plinc, we will extend that. So we have a number of our own integrations. So whether it's sort of more digital advertising platforms, till systems, loyalty engines is another really good one. And actually, again, that uniqueness we look to preserve. So if there is, when we're working with a business and they have a bespoke till system, well, success is only when we integrate the Aptico platform with that till system, and that is indeed what we look to do. So yeah, I think ultimately it's that flexibility really. I think robustness on the data coming in and doing all of the upfront work to make sure that we understand it and it aligns with the business's view of their customers, and then the flexibility of the data going out to ensure that we're maximizing all of the different opportunities where we can use audiences and personalization from Aptico to ultimately influence the customer experience.
Yeah, I think the that point around retaining the nuance of a brand's data and customer entity is really important. I think one of the big ironies of our space is, we're in a world of dealing in relevancy and personalization and great customer experiences. And then from a platform perspective, we're often forced to shoehorn our data into a preset model. So I think that's particularly a very important point, as well as the reconciliation and the work that goes behind that. Great, thank you. So I think moving on a little bit then, we've touched on what all that good looks like in the concept of audience agility. I mean, Graham, thinking more a bit about best practice, what does good audience agility look like? I mean, not just sending more campaigns because you can, because you're freed up to do that and you're enabled to do that. How does it really manifest itself? What does good look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of again building on the previous points. It's sort of moving more to relevance rather than volume itself. So you can send a lot of campaigns, but as long as they're being sent to relevant audiences who want to receive them, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, a lot of it comes down to that targeting. So who are the right, what's the right customer segment? And that's going to be driven by the insight, as we've talked about before. And if we can get that right, we're going to be delivering more relevant communications to the customers. And I guess the ways that we do that, I mean, the reality is we're sitting on masses of customer data, and tools like Apteco really help us to make use of that more. But one of the key, I guess, ways that we try and move a business forward is moving from reactive targeting to proactive targeting. So this is where whether we can bring in predictive models, so whether it's some of the unalized models that we will expose through Aptico, so our category affinity or our future value model, or whether it's actually using the Aptico tools directly. So actually, there's a great lookalike functionality within the Orbit platform, and it just allows us to actually build really, really tight audiences that we know are going to react positively to our communications, and we can do that really quickly through all of the data that we have, and then using lookalike modeling to find the next group of customers that we should also be targeting. And that the ability again to do all of that within 15, 20 minutes without having to scope it into another team, what we're getting at the end of it is a much more relevant audience. And it's an audience that is based on what we think they're going to do in the future and how we can influence that rather than, maybe just what they've done in the past. Probably the other element as well is to be totally, to be agile, ultimately, we don't always know about every campaign if it's going to work. So measurement is just a really important point, and I think it just needs to be built in. And actually having, the Aptico tool allows us to automatically take control cells. From a Plinc perspective, we then surface those and do the post-campaign analysis within our campaign analyzer, and ultimately it allows the end users to run campaigns today, review them tomorrow, and then straight back into the tool to optimize them. And that might mean refining the audiences. Sometimes, it might just be this campaign has worked, but it didn't work for a particular segment. So that the simple action is just stop it because it is not relevant. And, that just doesn't happen enough. Probably the last bit though, that's even at that, we know we all are customer centric, but trade teams have their pressures, and sometimes the comms still need to just go out. And I think the other bit is having the right checks and balances and fail safes across all of it. So yes, we can be agile, we can build more campaigns, but we can still have suppression rules sitting over the top of it. We can still deduplicate campaigns because in reality, it happens. And I think one of the really good bits of functionality in the Aptical platform is a Venn diagram. And I think as marketeers, we all think in Venns. We're running 3 campaigns today. What's the overlap? What am I going to do with the overlap? How am I going to pick the most relevant com for a client, for a customer? And actually, that type of visual capability within the tool, we can do that in a really visual way, which A helps us present the business case back to the rest of the business so they can understand why we're making that decision, but then we can also act on it really quickly. So yes, I spend 50% of my time with Venn diagrams, but that because it is a very effective way of doing it, and it's just a capability that you don't see that much across the wider marketing cloud space.
Being able to create an audience directly from a Venn diagram is ridiculously powerful, and it always has been. I mean, James, just building on that a little bit, like the point around just because we can do more doesn't necessarily mean we should do more. How do you support marketeers with a more thoughtful campaign planning process? Everyone's under so much pressure. There's so much desire to get more done. How do we just help get things thought through more?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of techniques that we have in the platform that can help. And, as simple as A/B testing, allowing you to test content in an advanced stage of a campaign, maybe test a model, decide which of 2 models is going to be most effective in picking the top people to communicate with on a particular topic, ensuring you're using models and indexing and scoring all of the time to pick the prioritization, as well as Graham said, ensuring you're applying correct suppressions and privacy controls upfront, so that the numbers that you see in Apteco are accurate, but you have time to think about them. You're
Yeah.
working on that data in time to do a test and learn type approach where you've got reporting built into Apteco that will help you see how many people you are activating, what the response and reaction is. And Plinc, as you've all just heard, do a great job in providing the freshest, up-to-date data cycles in 15 minutes typically. And that's highly unusual in the Apteco partner base and the Apteco deployments to have that data quite so timely to allow you to use the audience and routing rules that you define in Apteco to ensure you're picking the right people, giving them the right treatment, and then seeing the results in the analytics before you then perhaps roll out to the full volume of the target group. I will just comment on the Venn diagrams. I wrote the very first version of the Venn diagram for FastStats as it was. It was a plugin, and it must have been 25 years ago. I had no idea, frankly, that all these years later, Venn diagrams would still be a significant part, but they really are a significant part of that bridge from the technical data, the subsets and queries that we create, and the visualization that's easy for data savvy and non-technical people to use. And that's part of the mix where those people can stand back, take time, think about the customer experience journeys that they want to create. And then the Apteco platform can help determine which journey is available and appropriate for a particular recipient every day. You can have models running that you then use to say this particular recipient is best suited for this treatment rather than that treatment, and then ensuring that that's deployed and activated beautifully. So using the power of the software, using the power of the service, using the extent of the data that we can now gather, we can ensure that you have time to think harder about your communication machinery, your marketing machinery, your messaging, rather than always chasing your tail, trying to get something out the door as a tactical step in a hurry. Let's make sure you have the models that can give you time to think about it.
Excellent, thank you. Well, with just 2 minutes left, I just want to try and close off with maybe a little practical advice. Graham, maybe I can come to you first. For a brand listening right now that recognizes the challenges that we're talking about and maybe, can see themselves in this whole audience agility piece, where should they start? We've heard a lot about what good looks like. We've heard a lot about the great and rich feature set that is within Apteco. What is the practical thing that a brand on this call now can kick off with?
Yeah, no, for sure. Going back to right at the start, no two brands have the same tech setup or same marketing process at all. So I think just, taking a step back and understanding what does work well now and where the gaps are. I think hopefully there's a number of different elements, that we talked about today that could potentially resonate with a brand. And I think isolating that part of the campaign process where they sort of have the most issue is a starting point. And I think actually when you do that, it's not necessarily a rip and replace there. The whole process doesn't need to change. We need to focus on that bit that we can make an improvement on. I think, as James had mentioned before, the companion element of how the suite can be used really. And I think what we then do is probably a more recent, with all the pressures that we all have with, investment, etc., is actually how can we put a focused pilot together? How can we identify that area and work to prove value and prove to the business that actually rather than replacing everything, there's another approach here where we can complement what we already have, but ultimately still plug that gap. And so, yeah, I think that's ultimately it. And I think trying to work towards a pilot is a really good way of proving to the business incremental improvement rather than scaring them off with big transformational change.
Yeah, absolutely. The concept of pilots and proof of concepts, I think, have never been more important where brands are looking to realize fast sort of value and improve the case to the business before moving forward. I think that's really important. James, just with a minute to spare, anything to add to that? What's the most
Yeah,
important?
I would just encourage people to get their teams hands-on to a managed and privacy-safe data set that's ready to use, that's not going to have an impact on your production systems, where you can use models to prioritize who you're considering and how you're treating them. Let the team do their work. You can give that access to a wide team and then in a safe environment, they can share the insights and reports that they create so that you can encourage the rest of the business to understand the opportunities. So get the data out to the team, democratize access to it, and democratize the insight that you gain from it.
Thank you. Now, well, I'm conscious of time. We actually do have a question, and I should have said at the start that the Q&A is open. I always forget to do that. But we have a question just to quickly put to you. We're trying to transition from campaign-based to always-on system-based CRM, focusing on individual signals. We have a mountain of data, so this sounds great for decisioning. My question is how you plug in the right content at the right time. To get this right requires an equivalent mountain of content, surely. Maybe Graham, I can come to you with this one first.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, for many years, I think there's always been data and there's always been decisions to be made, and content, is difficult. And I think when we think about that wider sort of process, and the integrations, for example, having a view of your product catalog in your ESP that's easily accessible with all of the relevant metadata. And I think there can be work done up front such that the marketeers can focus on that. Let's just take product recommendations as an example. You shouldn't be thinking about all of how am I going to get all of the images and prices and so forth for these products. You should be just more focused on what are the right products to deliver for our customers, and actually being able to reuse. The reality is most of our brands have very good content management systems. There's a lot of content in there, and with the right planning, we can get to a world where we can reuse a lot of that content, and it's about having an efficient process that allows the marketing clouds and the Apteco solutions to work in tandem with that. So there's a lot of really good things that can be done there. Probably the only other point though is that the world is changing. AI is a fast moving world, and I think whilst doing it in a controlled way, I think being prepared to experiment a little bit with things as well. And I think, ultimately, I think as time goes on, AI is going to enable us to generate even more content and be more relevant as well. And I think actually, even, within the Aptical platform, there's some really good work being developed around their Orin product and which is an AI solution within there. But I guess just that wider piece on being open to some of the capabilities that are emerging is I think your competitors are going to be doing it as well, so we sort of have to be doing it as well.
Absolutely. James, is there anything that you wanted to add to
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, the first challenge for the person asking the question is how to get hold of all that signal data. There will be thousands of signals per person, millions of signals being received. That's a big challenge, and you need to look at the data model of how you're going to pull that into Apteco, how you can then create segments and cohorts and models from it. As Graham has alluded to, we have Orin, the generative AI in Apteco. It can help with understanding your data and creating audiences under a chat instruction. It's not yet agentic to do it directly from the signals, but that's our directional aspiration, so that data can drive the agent to create resources, but or create cohorts. But and incidentally, we don't attempt to create content. We're not doing image work or parsing a product catalog in Orin AI. But we do have best next offer, of course, technique built into the product that you can then use from those signals to determine what treatment you're going to give to each of the potential recipients.
Thank you. Well, thank you both for your time. Thank you all for attending today. Very useful. We'll be sending around a write-up and some points from this to attendees. So please look out for that in your inbox. But James, Graham, thank you very much for your time. Very interesting chat. Thank
Thank
you
you,
all for
Stuart.
joining.
Thanks for everyone who joined.
Thank you. Have good days. Thank you
Bye.
all.